Will Labour shatter any progress the Tories made on immigration? There were 11% fewer worker visas granted than last year, 26% fewer health and care visas, 13% fewer study visas. James Cleverly was taking all the credit.
This is what I achieved when I was Home Secretary, because I made the difficult decisions. And sadly, what we have seen since Labour have taken over is that they are reversing a number of those decisions. They are easing the visa restrictions that I put in place.
Maybe, just maybe, we'd turned a corner. But immediately the rumours start that Labour will reintroduce free movement of people for under 30s across Europe. And it looks like the architect of Theresa May's Brexit surrender, Ollie Robbins, could become head of the civil service. Well, it looks a lot like free movement could be on the table now when it comes to Labour's negotiations with the EU going forward. On illegal immigration, well, in the year ending June 2024, there were 38,784 detected irregular arrivals. That's 26% fewer than in the year ending June 2023. Now, 81% of those arrived by small boat. But now there's no Rwanda deterrent. And here's the killer number, OK? A total of 118,882 people were waiting for an initial decision on their asylum application in the UK by the end of June this year. So that's a large number of people, that 118,000 people, OK? Under this Labour government, all of them will be allowed to try to claim for asylum now, even if they came here illegally. The highest number of small boat arrivals came from Afghanistan, Iran, Vietnam, Turkey and Syria. The only place we can realistically send people back to en masse is Vietnam. Our Home Secretary and Prime Minister have said nothing about today's immigration figures that I've seen. Is that because they know that they'll get a lot higher under their watch? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I've got columnist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn and Chair of the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee, Susan Hall, and former Labour Party advisor as well, Matthew Larser. Patrick, I'll start with you. Do you think that any gains that might have been made there from the Conservatives will be immediately undone by Labour?
I think we're being far too generous on the Conservative Party, to be honest. They're talking about falls in certain categories. There was still well over 1 million visas issued to foreign nationals to come and live in Britain long term under their final year. The only reductions are relative to the even more astronomically appalling figures, again in breach of their manifesto commitments, in the previous 2 years before that. So James Cleverly has got a lot of gall to claim that he's this great migration sceptic hero. The numbers he presided over are still absolutely catastrophic for the whole country. Now, will Labour exceed them and put them up again? I certainly think Labour lacks the appetite to bring immigration down to anything like the level that most voters would like to see it at, but they'd be going some to exceed the Tory aggregate level over the last 3 years. So I think a plague on both their houses. I think you're right that they might lean towards some version of free movement, which would go against the spirit of their own election pledges. They're clearly not going to remove many asylum seekers. They've allowed the people who were banned under the Illegal Migration Act, which they've dumped, to then come onto the asylum register. This is all terrible, but I don't think the Tories are in any position to lecture the new government.
Particularly happy about it. Fair enough. OK, Susan, I want to zone in now on this 118,000 people who are still awaiting a first decision on their asylum applications. This isn't even subject to appeals yet. All of those now will be given the opportunity to at least apply for asylum under Labour. How do you see that going?
Well, none of it's gone very well. I do think you're being very harsh on James because things were beginning to be reversed, if you like. And obviously we didn't have the opportunity to continue to do that. We also
had another 5 months.
We also had a deterrent in place, and we haven't got a deterrent anymore. The people that are looking to go for asylum, a third of them are the ones that come over on the boats. We have got to stop people coming over on the boats. Labour came into power saying, oh, they're going to smash all the gangs and everything. Well, if it was that easy, we would have done it. It's not that easy. So they've come in saying they're going to deal with it all. Let's wait and see, but I actually don't think they will. The one thing I do know, We have got far too many people coming into the country, and that is why we have got so much civil unrest at the moment, and it will get worse. It really will get worse.
OK, so you think actually civil unrest will get worse as a result of this level of immigration? I mean, with that in mind, Matthew, do you think that Labour will actually do anything to tackle immigration? I mean, we've got these figures today. It will be very easy for the Tories, as James Cleverly is doing, to at least try to spin it that we were turning a corner, we were turning a bit of a corner. You know, Labour could be playing with fire here if they don't do anything about it.
Well, James can spin it however much he likes, but let's just separate the two for a minute. On legal migration, it's not like illegal migration. Obviously, is you have to react to, but you don't control it. On legal migration, you control it. What happened is after Brexit, basically the Tories, with their hands on the lever of power, not being able to blame Brussels anymore, basically introduced an insane legal migration policy, which is what allowed hundreds of thousands of dependents to come in. And what James cleverly did was to reverse some, not all, of the mistakes that they'd made once Brexit had delivered the Tories their hands onto the levers. On illegal migration, what we've seen is that the Tories were doing effectively, they did a fast-track system, which meant that more applications have been processed, but that the destruction of Rwanda has meant that the total is now crept up again. We cannot have 100,000 plus people sitting around the country, many of them in hotels, while their applications are processed.
It's interesting, because for the first time that I can remember, when a set of immigration figures come out, we don't have a serving Prime Minister or Home Secretary commenting on those. And I just wonder why that is.
Well, I think it's because Labour would prefer to talk about other things. I mean, they got through the election, and immigration historically has been a terrible weakness for the Labour Party. The Conservatives gifted them a free pass through the election by, as Matthew was summarising very fairly, the ludicrously liberal legal migration and dependence policy. I think Labour knows that it hasn't got the political will to deliver sort of stringent cuts to migration or to deal effectively with illegal immigration. So they would really prefer to let this just wash through and focus on other things. I mean, I think the missing piece here is reform. Reform undoubtedly wouldn't have got anything like 4 million votes had the Conservatives delivered either on reducing legal migration or effectively tackling illegal migration. And, you know, Rwanda was always a chimera. It never actually took shape. It should have been given a chance to, but Labour doesn't want to tackle illegal immigration.
It does, Patrick, but Rwanda wasn't the way to do it. I mean, for example, did you know under the Tories, the deportation of convicted foreign criminals fell by a fifth across their 14 years in office? So one of the things that the government's going to concentrate on is deportations. And so in the first week of the government, you mentioned Vietnam there, the first week of the government, a plane was full going to Vietnam, and it was the plane that was sitting on the tarmac paying for Rwanda.
I do think, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, but I do think that whilst people generally, I'm not speaking for everyone here, but whilst people generally would like to see a reduction of all illegal immigration, and that includes people who might be working in nail bars or working at car washes and things, I think people do have more of a concern about the fact that right now in Dunkirk there are both sides of the Sudanese civil war, and they are currently fighting each other. We had an exclusive on this at the moment, and they are actually trying to come to Britain. And I think those are the people that this Labour government does not appear to yet have a plan to deal with, Sue.
Yeah, which is why they are not coming out and saying anything. The other problem, I think, is I don't think they truly understand the feeling in the country of the problems that immigration is bringing to some places, especially places that are poorer areas. I don't think Starmer understands. He calls everybody far right, and the rioters are wrong. There's no question. They should not be rioting, absolutely. But there's a depth of feeling there in the country where people are absolutely fed up. And I don't think a lot of politicians, mainly the Labour politicians, understand that. They just don't understand why some people, very many people in our country, are so fed up with things as they are.
But you must have been incredibly frustrated, Susan, with your own party, because realistically there were 14 years, and you know one of the major reasons why the Tories got such a kicking and Reform got so many votes was because of the immigration issue. And it's all very well and good for us to sit here now, as we are doing, and saying, well, maybe James Cleverly was turning a corner, and there may be some truth to that. But it didn't need to get to that stage, did it?
No, I'm very sad that it has got to that stage, because people are taking to the streets and they're getting themselves into trouble beyond the ones that are really dreadful, because their frustration of nobody doing anything about what they know is causing problems within the country. And that's why politicians of all colours need to actually start to understand why so many of the public, so many Britons are so fed up with the situation we're in now.
And we had, so when the riots and protests or whatever were taking place, Starmer did not want to mention that word immigration. And he didn't want to mention it, as we've since found out, for the reason that he didn't want to provide any legitimacy to the idea that that's why these people were doing these things. OK. But now we've had these immigration figures out again today, and they're not commenting on those either. And I just wonder if it raises serious questions about whether or not they even want to do anything about it.
I think it certainly does, and I couldn't agree more with Susan, and particularly in many of the red wall towns, a lot of the Channel migrants put up in hotels in more deprived areas for economic reasons. The hotels are cheaper. A lot of those communities have got the bad end of mass legal immigration, where they've got ethnic minority communities have sprung up with very high welfare dependency rates, competing for social housing, which is under-resourced anyway, and suspicions of cultural incompatibility. For instance, with the grooming gangs across various former mill towns in Lancashire and Yorkshire. So there is a pent-up and quite understandable feeling of immense frustration.
Just final word to you on this, Matthew, because this ties in with what we're going to be talking about next, because actually the other kind of announcement that never quite was today was about this idea of EU freedom of movement for the under-30s. Now, I don't want to tar every single under-30 with the same brush, but one would imagine that the vast majority of them have not had the chance to amass a huge amount of personal wealth yet, maybe would not be coming over here and buying their own properties, etc. It, to me, screams of young people who would come in en masse, occupy the lower end of the rental and housing market and maybe the lower end of the labour market as well. And I look at these figures now and I think, isn't that the opposite of what we need?
No, because, I mean, if you talk to employers, I mean, one thing we need to do is have a genuine national conversation about immigration. You know, we heard today from care home owners that they're worried under what happened already, under the reductions we've seen today, that they're not going to be able to staff those care homes. The scheme that's been mooted is to do a similar, it's not to introduce free movement, it's to do a similar thing for European young people. That's both British people going to the mainland Europe and vice versa, as we have done for decades with Aussies and Kiwis, which is allowing a certain number of people to come both ways, which is what we do. We all know people in their 20s who've gone to Australia and New Zealand on work visas. It's 2 years. So, I mean, whether it's 2 years or 3 years, I don't think it makes a massive difference.
But I think it's a distinction without a difference. In fact, under free movement, the vast majority of European nationals coming here were in the 20 to 30 age bracket, so it might not contradict the letter of Keir Starmer saying I'm not bringing back free movement, but in effect it's 90.
But crucially, most of them went home.
Free movement, and this is the hospitality industry lobbying vested interests, crushing the whole spirit of Brexit, which was about allowing working class wages to rise, right? And the Labour Party of all parties.
Well, this is the perfect point to just round us off here, because we're going to be having a debate on that shortly, actually. But coming up.